Hi, I'm Carlo Angiuli, and this is the short talk for Internalizing Representation Independence with Univalence. Representation independence theorems for programming languages can get quite technical, as many of us know all too well, but the basic idea is usually about the same. Suppose our language has some interface mechanism or some way of equipping an abstract type with some operations. For example, we may have an abstract type of queues equipped with enqueue and dequeue operations. Now, suppose we have two implementations of this interface. Representation independence states that if we can exhibit some kind of correspondence between these implementations that respects the operations of the interface, then the two implementations are observationally equivalent, which is to say that they always produce the same answers. This is important because it allows us to reason about a simple implementation and then swap it out later for a more complicated, more efficient, but equivalent one. These results are usually formulated as metatheorems. The classic example is system F, for which representation independence results are consequences of the parametricity of universal quantification. But if our language has dependent types, we could do better. Ideally, we would like to know internally, as a theorem stated and proven inside the language itself, that related implementations are actually equal. That way, we can take advantage of representation independence to prove complex implementations correct by transferring correctness results from simpler, related implementations. And that is the subject of this paper. Concretely, we work in Cubical Agda, which is a recent extension to the dependently typed programming language Agda. And all I have time to say right now is that Cubical Agda provides a new version of the equality type that allows us to compute with univalence and higher inductive types, features inspired by homotopy type theory, and which make this work possible. Everything in the paper is formalized in the Cubical Agda library that's currently being developed on GitHub. Univalence is basically just the Ada law for the universe of types. Normally, we know that if two types are equal, then they are isomorphic. We can cast back and forth between those types, and those casts cancel. Univalence is the converse. Not only do type equalities give rise to isomorphisms, but every isomorphism arises as a pair of casts induced by some equality. By combining universes with sigma types, we can express the idea of types equipped with operations. For example, a queue is a type queue paired with an element of queue and enqueue and dequeue functions. In the presence of univalence, two elements of this type are equal if and only if there is an isomorphism between the underlying types that commutes with the operations. This idea is known as the structure identity principle, and while it sounds a lot like what we need, unfortunately, in most cases of representation independence, the underlying types are not actually isomorphic. We can see this already in the case of queues, which can be represented as a single list, where you enqueue on the front and dequeue off the back, or as a pair of lists, where you enqueue on the front of the first list and you dequeue off the front of the second list. And if the second list is empty, then you reverse the first list and use it as a second. These are known as batched queues. Every queue has a unique representation as a list queue, but many possible representations as a batched queue depending on where the queue is divided. Our key insight is that we can identify all the batched queues that correspond to a single list queue using a quotient higher inductive type. If we do this, the queue operations descend to the quotient, and we obtain a structure-preserving isomorphism between list queue and the quotient, which by univalence gives us an equality. And in fact, this works in general, although in the general case you have to quotient both sides. That is, any structure-preserving correspondence between implementations induces quotients on both types, such that the operations descend to the equivalence classes, and the correspondence itself turns into a structure-preserving isomorphism between the quotients. Combining this with univalence, we can prove that the quotiented implementations are equal internally in Cubical Agda, letting us transfer results between two representations. The paper includes the details of the batch queue example from this talk, as well as matrices and finite multisets. Thanks for watching.